Hey y'all, some signs and symptoms that your space probably needs to be cleansed. I would say, first of all, according to just how most people are living right now and all of the portals that we have open between watches, phones, computers, TVs, screens, just assume that your space could probably use some love and a touch up spiritually and probably some prayer and cleansing. Okay, hotel rooms, always, always, always. I always pray over hotel rooms wherever I stay. I had an experience in Belize a few years ago when I was on a medical mission trip down there. We were in Belize City, staying at a hotel. Came in with some of the other ladies and said, hey, y'all, I think we should pray over this space. We were praying and asking God to cover the sins that may have been committed in that space. And the water stopped working appropriately and they moved our room. They moved us out of that room into another room. We found out later when we moved into a village to do some ministry later, we told them where we stayed and the people there couldn't believe it because they said, oh, that hotel's known for sex trafficking and murder. We can't believe y'all stayed there. Other chances that you can bet on the space or the land needing to be cleansed, places where you know overt sin has been committed or is being committed. All right, obviously in the spirit realm, things can set up camp and kind of create strongholds. That's a whole conversation and teaching, but they're actually like principalities and certain demonic assignments that are set up over certain portions of land, areas of land, homes, etc. Those are established through sin and iniquity, generational stuff a lot of the time. There's a lot of that here in Chattanooga. I've shared about that in other videos about the Civil War, the Trail of Tears, the Cherokee being evicted, a lot of the racism. Now it's domestic violence and gangs kind of warring over this area. So there are different assignments to different places, and sin and iniquity can open portals. So if you are dwelling in a place where you know sin has been committed and hasn't been dealt with, that's definitely a place you want to press into and bring some cleansing and the blood of Jesus in to do some cleanup. Some people have the gift of seeing in the spirit. I've met certain people who operate in ministry who have the gift of seeing angels and demons. There's a guy, Blake Healy, who wrote a book called The Veil. I flew into Atlanta years ago to meet with him when I lived in Maryland and had him kind of tell me what he saw over me in the spirit. You should check out that book. He's had that gift since he was little. It's called The Veil by Blake Healy. He can see the demonic and the angelic. Super fascinating stuff. Some people God's given that gift to. Other people might see things moving around in their space. You might see shadows. Your kids and your animals will tell you about stuff that's there. Animals usually act skittish. I know my dogs, when I've been in spaces where things have been unclean or foul or evil, Rhett, my golden retriever, he moves around. He's really anxious. He can't rest. He might start vomiting a lot. Your animals are in distress. They can't settle down. Also true with like horses and other animals that are very sensitive to the spirit realm. Pay attention to your animals. Your children will tell you about things that are unclean that are hanging out there. Kiddos are pure. That's oftentimes why the enemy tries to attack them so intensely, like in their sleep, at nighttime, especially when they're vulnerable. I had that when I was little, and my dad and mom had opened up things that they were ignorant to because they weren't walking with the Lord then. But I had a lot of fevers, night terrors, hallucinations, visitations, manifestations. So kiddos will often tell you, Mommy, Daddy, there's some man standing at the edge of my bed, or there's something in my closet, or there's something on the wall, blah, 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 blah. So kiddos and animals are often a sensitive telltale sign if something's there that doesn't need to be there. So those might be some of the more obvious things. Some of the less obvious things that I've been learning about, the Lord's been teaching me about, that will tell you about the spiritual health of the land. I'm going to continue to share. Birds are fascinatingly connected to the spiritual atmosphere of a property. Birds are very indicative of the spiritual atmosphere of the land. When you have vulnerable birds, birds like doves indicate peace. That's why doves are part of Noah's Ark. When they sent the dove out from the ark and it didn't return, they knew that the flood had passed, the waters had settled, and they could leave the boat. Doves are indicative that there's peace. Songbirds, vulnerable birds, cardinals, etc. Things like hawks, owls, predatory birds often can be signs of unclean spirits or predator spirits. Not always. I mean, those birds in themselves are not cursed, but symbolically the spirit realm will use some of those types of birds as an indication of things that are present that don't need to be there. I've had prophetic dreams about owls devouring hawks, and times that I've had unclean spirits on my property, I've had hawks come down and just kind of continue to poach and scare off all of my songbirds. So, and times that I've had witchcraft curses being incanted against me in the spirit realm, I find dead birds on my property or around my vehicles in my practice. You have things like frogs. This sounds silly. I love frogs, but when you have like an infestation of frogs, those are actually indicative of sexually unclean spirits, especially at the threshold of a door. So if there are lots of frogs camped out around the threshold of doors, often that's a sign that there are sexually unclean spirits present. Bug infestations, roaches. I've had beetle hatcheries when I've had unclean things on my property. Water. You want to pay attention to spiders. Spiders are connected to witchcraft and the occult. I've seen spiders on the wall in certain hallucinations or visions or dreams when unclean things have been present. Spiders are part of, again, the occult, etc. Again, now all of these things in them of themselves are not necessarily cursed, y'all, but they can be used symbolically to show us what's playing out in the atmosphere. Snakes, obviously, I know a lot of people are loving snakes, but the whole python spirit thing, cobras, etc., vipers, those can be really indicative. Okay, so snakes. There are fascinating stories about satanic temples being torn down, and under the altar of where people worshipped Satan, they found dens of vipers that had to be, or rattlesnakes that had to be burned and removed from properties. So oftentimes snakes and poisonous snakes are indicative of unclean spirits or satanic rituals that are being hosted in places. So pay attention to the animals on the land. Jesus says you will know a tree by its fruit. That's also true of the land. Like Eden, the Garden of Eden was designed to bear fruit and to bring the glory of God. After the curse and the sin entered in, now the land oftentimes is cursed and is carrying foul and unclean things. And the land and the bugs and the animals and how animals, etc., behave on the land are going to tell you about that. Okay, same thing in your house. If you have water issues, a lot of the time when there are leaks, a lot of ceiling leaks, that's indicative of witchcraft and foul and unclean things that are present. Water is very powerful in the spirit realm. Yes, so water is very powerful in the spirit realm, very, very symbolic. So when you have mold issues, leaky issues, plumbing issues, sewage issues, oftentimes those are very indicative that there are foul and unclean things that need to be evicted from the property. Okay, so water, bugs, animals, how your kiddos are acting, and then is there erratic behavior? Is there a certain impulse to react or behave a certain way that maybe is out of character for you or the people that you're on the land or the property with? It's often a sign of a spirit or spirits trying to manifest through people and creating foul fruit. So pay attention to how people behave on the land, how you want to behave. If there's certain thoughts that come in that don't sound like your normal way of thinking, if you have certain impulses to behave or talk a certain way, oftentimes that's because of spiritual influences showing up that are not actually from you. It's from the kingdom of darkness that we need to pay attention to and get rid of. And then pay attention to lights, y'all. This is something the Lord has shown me in the last few years very deliberately. When there are unclean things present or attached to people, the lights will start flickering, right? So electricity is energy. And again, the kingdom of evil is trying hard to snuff out light and get rid of light, but also feed off of energy and electricity. So if you're having electrical issues, I've had that happen in spaces or places where I've been out at restaurants, where I've been with somebody who's in the middle of maybe blaspheming Jesus, if we're in theological conversation and the lights start flickering, or people start tripping in restaurants for no reason. I've been in those situations where I'm in the middle of dinner with somebody who's like, blah, 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 kind of an antichrist spirit. And then all of a sudden the whole waiting staff, as they approach our table, trips and dumps an entire tray of waters and drinks for no reason. That is indicative that something's hanging out in the spiritual atmosphere that's trying to sabotage and create distress or unrest. So all of those things are signs and symbols to pay attention to. All right, so thanks for bearing with me. There's lots to talk about in a little amount of time with a culture that has a short attention span. So if you have any questions about anything going on, feel free to shoot me a private message. This is part 3 of how to know if your space needs cleansing. All right, again, just assume that with all the portals that people have opened with their screens, that most of our spaces need some love and attention and could use the blood of Jesus and some prayer to kick things out. But these are other fruits, if you will, to pay attention to, that perhaps your space is hosting some things that are unclean and not from the kingdom of God. Again, stay tuned. I'm going to teach you in the next few videos how to pray deliberately to cleanse the space, to evict that stuff, and how to try and keep your space clean and blessed and peaceful moving forward.